Hello and welcome to the Wake Up with Gratitude podcast. I'm your host, Julie Boye, and today I am so grateful and honored to have a very special guest and a good friend, Steph Jagger, here with me. Hello, Steph.
Hi, Julie. I feel like this is like reunion time because we've been able to speak in the past on this beautiful podcast. I'm just so honored and thrilled to be back.
Oh, I'm so excited. And Steph and I have this great connection. She is a sought after mentor and coach whose offerings guide people through deeper understanding of themselves and their stories. She is an incredible storyteller. Her work, which includes speaking and facilitating, lies at the intersection of loss, the nature of deep remembrance, and a personal journey of recreation. And that is, really that remembrance is so critical in this new book that is launching imminently, Everything Left to Remember. And I know this has been quoted many times, but as Steph says in her own words, it was a trip my mother will never remember and a journey I'll never forget. So my friend, before we go into this interview though, I would like to take a moment to pause and to give thanks for the land on which I reside as an uninvited guest. I am here on the traditional territory of the Nanaimo people, which is now called Nanaimo, and this is unceded territory. So I honor this land, and I start in this way because in your book, you also honor the land in so many beautiful ways. And I just wanted to bring that into what we're sharing today. So I'll pass it over to you if you want to share as well before we start.
Yeah, I'm just south of you, right? So still Coast Salish territory, but I am on the land of the Suquamish people, the people of the Clearwater. And it's a beautiful place to reside, and I feel really grateful to be, grounded and nurtured in this place.
Yeah. I see that outside of your window. I see the tree and the nature, and that really is how your writing is grounded. Now, I would love it if in your own words, because it'll sound better coming from you, just give us a little bit of, what this book and this journey is about.
Yeah. So, the backbone of it in a very literal and tangible sense was in 2015, my mom was diagnosed with early onset Alzheimer's. And about 11 months after that, the two of us went on a road trip. We drove through a handful of different national parks through the Rocky Mountains, mostly Montana and Wyoming. And that provides, the backbone of the journey that we went on. And so there's a lot of writing about, the chronology of just that journey. At its core, though, certainly this book is, because of her diagnosis, touches on Alzheimer's and dementia. It also touches on, the mother-daughter relationship. But really, when I think about it, I think all of us are living inside of systems and relationships and ways of being that are in a state of collapse or crumble or disappearance. And I think we're all having a reckoning with who are we in the midst of that, and what will hold us if those things that we thought were going to hold us are no longer. And so in a much broader sense, that is what the book is about. Who will hold us now? And really, to me, the answer is us. Like, how do we do that? And how do we allow nature to assist us in that process?
Yeah, this book, there's a real rawness to it. There's a real I'm feeling your pain. So not living this myself, not having a parent or relative with Alzheimer's, dementia myself, although that is unfortunately far too common now. But I thought at the beginning, I had such an honor to read this book ahead of time through my phone, which I will just mention that there's something really, when you have a book that you just want to keep reading it on your phone is very hard because you can't turn the pages very quickly. So I will recommend that people, maybe not get the Kindle of this one, get the book. And that is like your last book, Unbound, which I had you on the podcast to share some of that story. I read that in hardcover. I read it several times because that is how your writing feels. it just feels like, to me, it feels like you're at the intersection of nonfiction and fiction, in this place where
Mm.
you know the story comes from reality. But on the other hand, the way that you write and you describe and you bring us into that world, you're like, am I in a really good fiction where I've lost myself in this story? That's how I feel your writing is. And that's what I felt while I was reading this book. I'm not sure if you've heard that kind of description of your writing before, but that's what it was like for me.
No, I haven't. I'm sitting here just in such gratitude because I haven't heard that description. And as soon as you said that, it makes a lot of sense to me because of course I'm looking at my life and what is, tangibly present. But I'm also a person who is always looking for the undercurrents of what we can see as the current on the top. And so that often takes me into, I mean, everything is my life and the truth, but it often takes me into a sense of mythology or a sense of dreams. Certainly there's a lot of dreams that are woven into this book. And so it does make a lot of sense to me that the articulation of that it sits kind of on the border of fiction and nonfiction, in that it is all real, it is all true, it is all from my life. But I really believe that, as we make meaning in our lives, as we attempt to make meaning of things, it often requires us to go to the kind of not obvious places that might feel like otherworldly almost.
Yeah. And that's what it feels like. And it's also this like examination of things in ways that we don't see, that I had never noticed before. And the way that your language speaks in a way that it does feel like you're in a different place, in a different world. But at the same time, I can be standing there, in Yellowstone National Park with you and really feel what that landscape is like and really feel those images just vibrant in front of me, but in a way that is anchored in your story and also this real talent you have for storytelling that I think is your true gift, is this ability to tell a story that just brings us, the reader, in. And when I first started the book, I was like, I don't know, I'm not sure. Like this seems so far beyond me, right? I'm estranged from my own mother. I don't have any, like, I have no connection to anybody who's dealt with Alzheimer's, dementia. Like, I just don't know that story at all. I was like, what am I really gonna like get into this story? And then there was a point where it was like, I am so in this and I don't want to stop reading it. So that's what really speaks to me about your writing, is this place where you bring someone, because I think sometimes as readers, we're like, well, I have to connect with the characters in order to be able to understand the story, especially if it's autobiographical.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And, I'm glad you said that. I've had that feedback on multiple different occasions, either like, oh, I was skeptical to read because I don't have, degenerative disease in my family, or, I'm a son and not a daughter. And so what will I pick up from that? And almost kind of across the board, there's been a resonance with a deeper thread of the book. And I, you also mentioned language, the specific language that I use. And I think this was a really, this has been an exploration, certainly for me, personally, also as a storyteller and really more specifically as a writer, was to get very, very intentional about using what I would call feminine, speaking from the feminine language and the feminine storytelling landscape. And that, to me, how I would describe that is, first of all, we're not very used to that. Most books, stories, narratives, fiction, academia, certainly, often come from a masculine narration or at least written in masculine energy. And so for me, what I mean by that is like, I was really trying to pull the story and the language I was using from my body, if that makes sense, as opposed to from my mind, from my ability to recollect something in a linear chronological, here's the story, this is what happened, here's how I made sense of it, and instead tried to kind of pull, from the landscape of my own body or my own lineage to see what was there. And that was, both an intentional decision as well as, in some ways experimental, because, this is learning for all of us.
Yeah, you can see that. I loved your first book so much. So to get into the second book and see how your writing has, the depth of your writing has really changed and grown, is this comment to, going into your body and your heart coming. I mean, your heart comes out on the page all the time.
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious, because I'm imagining that you didn't go into the trip thinking, I'm going to write a memoir about this. But did you, I'm guessing you're a journaler, like you had a journal with you, you took notes. How did that, like, what was your process during the actual trip to remember it
Yeah.
in a way that's beyond just the photos, right?
Yeah. I certainly took photos. I also took video. I often, because I knew, this was going to be a really unique trip in that she wouldn't remember it and nobody else was on it with us. And so there was actually a lot of times where I would just set up like a GoPro video on a picnic table and just press play. And then and just because I wanted to have the memories of it, or same thing, like on the dash of the car, I quite often would have a video. So I actually have a lot of video footage, and that was helpful to rely upon later down the road for, conversation and various different things that happened. No, I did not go into the trip thinking I would write a memoir about it. I knew I would write because that's how I process things. That's how I make sense of things and create meaning and understanding in my life. But I thought it was going to be, just personal journaling, maybe a snippet or here put into newsletters or various different things like how I normally kind of share in the world. But when it happened very quickly. When we were on the plane home from Montana to British Columbia, I found myself furiously taking notes in the app on my phone. And partway through that process, I mean, I just was typing madly, and I don't know, something struck me on that plane. Oh my gosh, this is probably bigger than I think it is. And it probably, if I feel an experience in my life is kind of beyond me, yes, there was me in the trip with my mom. Yes, there are things for me as the daughter of this woman to digest and process. But when I get a sense that there's something kind of bigger than that happening, which is what was occurring to me when I was typing notes, then I am often struck with, I think this is a book. And so it happened very quickly.
So interesting. Some of my own thoughts that came up as I'm reading, first of all, I was like, good for you for taking the time to make this trip. And without meaning to sound trite, but how many of us are not taking the trip? So you had a deadline in place because your mom being diagnosed with early onset Alzheimer's, you knew that you actually had a deadline, but we all have a deadline, right? Nobody is guaranteed. That's really about this whole wake up with gratitude theme. The way that I live my life is that tomorrow is not promised. And so you decided you took this trip because of a deadline, but you also could have not taken it because I'm sure there are many people for a number of reasons. There is definitely a privilege of being able to do this kind of thing. Absolutely. Right. But on the other hand, you're busy, you're writing, you're not, you could have put it off for another year and it would have not even been possible, which is so much in so many of our lives. So do you remember why you said this trip now?
Yeah, I had actually just come home from Montana from a ski trip, and quite literally my bags were still at the front door of the house, and I had just had a long day of travel, and I dropped my bags and I kind of went immediately to have a shower to like shower off the travel, and as I was in the shower, there was it just kind of came like a bolt out of the blue. You're supposed to go back. And I thought, well, that's weird because I don't normally go back. I like to explore new places. So I don't normally go back to places that I've traveled, but it seemed so insistent. And I kind of thought, am I supposed to go with somebody? And again, almost immediately it was like a voice answered, like, you're supposed to go with your mother. And I was like, well, that's kind of ridiculous. Because we've never really traveled together. Like, what, is it a ski trip? I wasn't quite sure. And I got out of the shower and I was still wet. And I walked into my husband's office and I was like, I think I'm supposed to go back to Yellowstone with my mom. And he was like, oh my gosh, yes, this is, and I just felt it in my body. And so I put my clothes on and immediately phoned. There was just a momentum. Like it was a compelling calling almost. And I think, me, we've had conversations before and you know me well enough to know, for me, one of the kind of, well, there's two things really on my bucket list. One is, am I listening to what I'm called to do? And two is, do I have the courage to say yes when I hear it? And so, that was a really distinct calling. And I've spent a lot of time in my life discerning the difference between receiving a thought, like that kind of bolt out of the blue, and thinking a thought, which is usually analytical, or we brush it away, or we try and make sense of it, or, those types of things. And I try to follow the thoughts I receive because I think they come kind of more holistically. So that was that. And again, I agree with you. I think we have to learn to say yes to those things. It takes a lot of time. And I you mentioned privilege, like there is, I don't have children, for example. And so it's really easy or easier for me to clear a calendar. And I do have 2 dogs. I have to have people watch, but I don't have to have, there's certain hurdles that don't exist for me that make it easier for me to say yes to that. There's also been, really intentional choices in my life to design my life that way so that I can say yes. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Oh, as soon as you asked that question, there's so many that just flood into my memory. I have really distinct memories of my mom when she woke up in the tent each morning, just like curled into her little magenta sleeping bag and just turning and being like, it's so cozy in here. It's so warm. She was smiling. She's so happy to be cozied up in a, warm sleeping bag, things like that. There's, they're all actually, as I kind of flip through them in my head, they're all very ordinary moments. There would be times where I would make, where I would, turn on the jet boil and boil water and make oatmeal. And she was fascinated, like just overcome with the jet boil. Like I remember, when my aunt did arrive to visit, she turned to me and she's like, wait, now watch this, watch her do this. This is amazing. She has like a stove right here. And so, they're just really ordinary moments like that. That fill me with just an immense sense of gratitude. None of them are the grand moments of the trip. It's all those kind of quiet, everyday, thinking about the way my mom's hand wrapped around a mug of warm oatmeal. Those are the moments that I have the most gratitude for.
I love that you bring that up, that it's in the littler moments, in the smaller bits that we can find a tremendous amount of gratitude. And I think, as I expand and explore my own gratitude practice, having been doing this work for a number of years now in the podcast in its 3rd year, and learning from other people around gratitude and getting away from, a listicle and inventory approach to gratitude. And if this is someone's first experience with the podcast or with gratitude, I think that's a great way to start. And at the same time, this noticing of gratitude in a little moment, I mean, it is a miracle that you're in the middle of nowhere and you have a little stove and you can make your coffee.
Yeah.
Like how, right? We take for granted that at home, we got the coffee pot or the 1 cup, and we just make the coffee and the water's there and it's super easy. So there is this moment of gratitude in the tiniest little bits. And I think that's what allows us to be centered in the present. And because your mom was often just finding herself in the present, right? There was just a moment of clarity and she was in the present and discovering things for the first time. I can see how you can see that from a perspective of gratitude. sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's an evolution, at least it's been my experience, an evolution in my journey with gratitude. I think at the very beginning of when I started to focus on gratitude in my own life, it was exactly what you said. Like it would be a mental looking back on the day and a thinking through of, what were highlights or what do I think I'm grateful for? And that's a really important part of the process, and certainly was for me. And I think where I am today and those moments that I mentioned on the trip, it's actually the gratitude is rooted in a feeling or a sensation in my body that as I reflect back, I'm like, oh my gosh, something softened, something loosened, something, gasped in awe, something felt warm. My belly felt, soft or round, it just, there's a specific feeling or sensation in my body that is telling me this is beautiful, as opposed to my mind or a listicle, as you said, like kind of saying like, that's beautiful because I've been told that that's beautiful and that's supposed to be beautiful, and like tick. And again, that's not to say those aren't important. That was a really foundational practice at the very beginning of my journey. And I think there's just been a shift for me to a more physical sense of gratitude, a somatic experienced sense of gratitude. And I think that's where that real ordinariness comes in, because we can have that with the taste of the tiniest sliver of chocolate. And this actually goes also to the topic of privilege. Like it didn't need to be a grand adventure to have the moment of oatmeal in a cup,
Right.
Yeah.
You right in this moment, I had a flash of the picture of your mom on the bench in front of the geyser, right?
Yeah.
That to me is the moment of gratitude,
Mm-hmm.
because your mom just was there, like present, because where else could she be?
Present. I don't know what it is about that moment and that image, for me was an extraordinarily powerful moment, on the journey itself, became even more powerful as I was reflecting upon it and writing about it. And it seems to be something that is brought up to me quite a bit, that moment with your mom. And I don't know, there is something very striking about everyone else having disappeared and her remaining to, where there is still beauty here, and where else shall I be other than in front of this beauty?
Yeah.
And it's, I don't know, that was a really, one of my favorite moments of the trip was seeing her sitting there like that. Yeah.
I love that you bring that up, that it's in the littler moments, in the smaller bits, that we can find a tremendous amount of gratitude. And I think, as I expand and explore my own gratitude practice, having been doing this work for a number of years now in the podcast in its third year, and learning from other people around gratitude and getting away from, a listicle and inventory approach to gratitude. And if this is someone's first experience with the podcast or with gratitude, I think that's a great way to start. And at the same time, this noticing of gratitude in a little moment, I mean, it is a miracle that you're in the middle of nowhere and you have a little stove and you can make your coffee.
Yeah.
Like how, right? We take for granted that at home we got the coffee pot or the one cup, and we just make the coffee and the water's there and it's super easy. So there is this moment of gratitude in the tiniest little bits. And I think that's what allows us to be centered in the present. And because your mom was often just finding herself in the present, right? There was just a moment of clarity, and she was in the present and discovering things for the first time. I can see how you can see that from a perspective of gratitude sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's an evolution, at least it's been my experience, an evolution in my journey with gratitude. I think at the very beginning of when I started to focus on gratitude in my own life, it was exactly what you said. Like it would be a mental looking back on the day and a thinking through of, what were highlights or what do I think I'm grateful for? And that's a really important part of the process, and certainly was for me. And I think where I am today and those moments that I mentioned on the trip, it's actually the gratitude is rooted in a feeling or a sensation in my body that as I reflect back, I'm like, oh my gosh, something softened, something loosened, something, gasped in awe, something felt warm. My belly felt, soft or round, it just, there's a specific feeling or sensation in my body that is telling me this is beautiful, as opposed to my mind or a listicle, as you said, like kind of saying like, that's beautiful because I've been told that that's beautiful and that's supposed to be beautiful, and like tick. And again, that's not to say those aren't important. That was a really foundational practice at the very beginning of my journey. And I think there's just been a shift for me to a more physical sense of gratitude, a somatic experienced sense of gratitude. And I think that's where that real ordinariness comes in, because, you know, we can have that with, you know, the taste of the tiniest sliver of chocolate. And this actually goes also to the topic of privilege. Like, it didn't need to be a grand, you know, adventure to have the moment of oatmeal in a cup.
Right.
You know?
Yeah. You, right in this moment, I had a flash of the picture of your mom on the bench in front of the geyser, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
That to me is the moment of gratitude,
Mm-hmm.
because your mom just was there, like present, because where else could she be?
Present.
And yeah, there is, I mean, every moment is magical if we choose to find it. And that there's a lot of you, I sense your anger, and you work through your anger in the story. And that's important because all emotions count.
Yeah.
All emotions are valid. And at the same time, this ability to find this gratitude just in the smaller moments is what helps this thread throughout of our day to really shift our outlook on life. And I asked you at the beginning before we started recording, I said, how are you? You said, I'm all of the things.
Yes. Yeah.
Because that's the truth, right?
Yeah. I mean, as I reflect back on the description of gratitude as being, you know, so grounded in my body now and such a somatic experience, I couldn't have gotten to that place of being able to access the feeling of gratitude in my body if I hadn't excavated and also felt grief, anger, rage, frustration, sadness, you know, all of these different things. And so I think when we cut ourselves off from feeling, you know, one side of emotions, if we want to call that the quote unquote negative side or place that feels more uncomfortable for many of us, we are also typically cutting off our ability to feel and access the other side as well. And so that ends up putting us inside of a kind of a constricted box that usually is something like, I'm fine. Everything's fine. I'm fine. And I think the more that we can expand from that place, you know, to feel kind of all of the different edges of our emotions, and really, you know, emotions, to me, it's emotions. It just stands for energy and motion. And there's not a good or bad or anything. It's just, there is energy and motion in my body, and I have labeled it something. And some of it feels really uncomfortable to me. So instead of letting it move and process, I stop it, or I create a narrative or whatever. And so there's been a lot of learning for me around, you know, just noticing when energy is moving in my body and allowing it to. And that's, again, you know, allowed me to ground into a gratitude practice that feels to me very embodied.
What you said there about it being work is so, we can't miss that part, right? We can't miss that the work is done on both ends of the spectrum. You know, I truly believe grief and gratitude can live in the same house. Just because you're grieving doesn't mean you can't find gratitude. And just because you're in gratitude doesn't mean you're not experiencing grief. So the two, they can live in the same house. Would it be all right, Steph, if I read just a small bit of your book that really, this is a point in the book where I was like, I saw myself in your story, or in your mom's story, actually.
Of course, I'd be honored.
Okay. Something happens when she's close to the water. Her undercurrent shifts. The steady hum of worry that runs in her background subtly subsides. I feel her energy, her whole self, melt into a more fluid and natural calm. Whenever she looks out over the ocean, or at a rippling lake, or a large rushing river, it's like a missing piece of her comes home. Some unnameable part of her sort of slips back into place. Oh, I felt that in my body. I felt myself when I stand in front of the ocean and how I feel. And for you to bring words to something that I personally felt, it just, it was so powerful. And also I
Mhm.
felt it, in those words, I feel this homage to your mother.
Mhm. Mhm.
You
Mhm.
know, as you were losing her, you you found this like really moment of honoring her.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think there's something she's taught me a lot about um, fluidity and surrender. And again, this kind of circles back a little bit to really beginning to root into a specific type of feminine energy, I think, which I just really associate in so many ways with water. And I also think, the life and death, when we come into this world, water breaks in order for us to enter.
Mm.
And when we leave this world, the number of tears shed, as a, it's almost like we create the river for people that are leaving with our own tears to kind of go out on. And I don't know, it became such an important part of this book. And, as a kid, I knew, she actually really didn't like to swim. She didn't love to be in the water, but anytime she was around it, just something inside of her changed.
Mhm.
And I loved that. And I think there was a lot for me to connect to, when I witnessed her in that space.
Yeah, I feel that so much. I really need to live close to the water.
Mm.
I mean, I do. I absolutely love where I live. And at the same time, there is a part of me that at some point, if I can be within walking distance, open my door, walk to the water, that is my ultimate dream. Because for me, much like I was reading about your mom, it really does shift the way that it just like brings me back to the earth. And for many people, it's the trees. You live in the trees, right? I mean, I'm watching you now. There's a beautiful tree outside your window. You live in the trees. And so that's another thing that your book really does is it brings us back to nature in a way. The pictures that you paint with your words, it
Mm.
not only does it put me in the place while I'm reading your book, it really makes me desperately want to see these places for myself. They've been
Mhm.
on my list,
Mhm.
and we've been through a couple years and of less travel for so many of us,
Yeah.
right? And so for those that haven't had an opportunity to travel themselves, I mean, read the book just for the nature and the beauty. I mean, let
Yeah.
alone the beautiful messages of remembrance and everything else. Come on this journey with Chef and with her mom and just be in nature with them. So
Mhm. Mhm.
there's one more thing I really want to ask you about in your story that I'd love for you to share a little bit about your experience sleeping in the teepee
Mm.
and that night there.
Yeah, I didn't actually sleep that well in the
Right.
day.
Fair enough.
We kind of stumbled upon this amazing place as we were driving out of Glacier National Park, and it was, yeah. Anyway, long story short, it's all in the book. We kind of ended up on this land um, that the owners had these kind of teepees set up with fire pits in the middle, and it was all really guided, it felt. And there's a couple of things that I really distinctly remember from that experience. One of which was just watching. I mean, we had been sleeping in a tent, so it was, okay, watching my mom get into her little sleeping bag and fall asleep. But there was something about having the fire in the center that was really so dreamy and beautiful and just amazing. And, kind of the smoke floating up and moving out the center kind of hole of the teepee. It was really gorgeous. For me, and I think you've read this, so there was a really deep connection made. I got up in the middle of the night and left the teepee so as to like go out to the grass to go pee, actually. And it was very dark. It was Montana, and it was a clear night. And at some point I looked up and it was so breathtaking, the stars. And that moment to me felt almost kaleidoscopic in nature, in like, I was all of a sudden flooded with a whole bunch of different memories that suddenly all kind of like clicked things into place for me. And of course there were stars, there were constellations, and there's kind of a big storyline that moves through the book that has to do with that. But actually I was on an author talk. I was listening to another author with their book, Ruth Ozeki, and she used the word constellate. She used it as a verb, and I just thought, oh my gosh, that's it. Like, that's what happened to me in that moment. Is there was a whole bunch of little puzzle pieces, and just in that moment that night, staring up at that, big sky, Montana in the night, it just, they clicked all together. They linked up all together, so that it was, quite literally, the story. I could see the constellation of events and what they all meant. And it was a really, really profound moment for me on the journey. Yeah, just something I'll never, that is like, I probably, I don't have one, but I probably should get a tattoo of that, of that moment. It was really powerful.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing. And also without too many, spoilers of the story, which is important as well. I mean, even if you know a little bit about this, it's not going to spoil the book, because the way, of course, you've written the story is different from the way you share it in the way you speak, which I think is important to acknowledge as well, is what our spoken stories and our written stories are very different. I had this great conversation. I had Kendra Hall on my podcast when her book launched, and we talked about how, a story that is told orally versus a story that is written is different. And I just wanted to hear it in your words a little bit more about that, because that did really strike me. And, that we often do forget to look up and just notice wherever we are. And I think that reminder of, look around you, and, I mean, we're doing this, I'm on video, but I mean, we're looking down at our phone all day long. We're looking down, and just the moment of looking up and seeing this infinite sky, even if you're not in Montana, and even if you're city, just even like looking up and reminding that there's so much more out there. And I just was so taken by how you brought that story alive. So thank you for sharing a little intro to it. So we know people are going to get this book. So as we wrap up, I just wanted to check in, because you do have through your website. So what is your website?
Yeah, so the website is stephjagger.com. Jagger is spelled like Mick Jagger and not Jagger, like Jägermeister. So stephjagger.com, and there's links across kind of Canada and the US for purchase options, whether you like to shop local or whether you like to kind of go with big box, that type of stuff. So there's links for that, all on the specific book page on my site. Yeah,
and I appreciate that too, that you've made it easy for the reader to, if they want to support a local bookshop, you can just look and see what bookshops. I mean, it tells you even how far they are from your house. Like,
I know. Isn't that amazing? Cool. I know they have that both in Canada and the US now. There's websites that you can, you look up the book, and it tells you what the closest kind of indie is to the independent bookstore is to your location, which is just magic.
So good. So I do highly recommend people pick up the physical book, hold this book in your hands. You're going to be reading it too quickly to be, Kindling along. Like, I appreciate for accessibility, the Kindle, and I like highlighting the notes, but I'm not one that's supposed to writing in a book. I will write in a book.
Same.
Okay. All right. Just to be clear. But you want your book in your hands. So when is the official launch date? So pre-orders are open as this podcast is live. And when's the official launch date? So
the official launch date is April 26th of this year. Yeah. And pre-orders are available now at any of those places that we've mentioned. And I'm hoping we still have yet to see. I know the borders are beginning to open up, but I'm really hoping to be able to come up to, especially British Columbia, to do an in-person event, and not sure yet whether that'll be, maybe Vancouver, maybe Victoria. We're not sure, but my fingers are crossed for that.
You know that if you come to the island, I will find you and I will be there. This is, I mean, we didn't share the story of how we first met, but it was you were doing a book tour for your first book in Toronto, and I lived in the suburbs, and I never drove downtown, and I didn't know where I was going. And it took me like 2 hours, and I got lost, and I showed up really late, but I still went in because I was like, I
Right.
have to meet Steph. And I snuck in the back, and the event's almost over,
So
but
great.
I will make the effort to find you wherever you are if that does happen, because listening to you read your book, your own book,
Mm,
just being in your presence it it just makes me smile. I love getting your newsletter. I should mention that if, when people on your website, please get on her whenever she wants to send out her newsletter.
yeah, right.
It's
Right.
always a treat though when it shows up in my inbox. I get so excited
Yeah.
because it reminds me of just how much I love your writing and how much I love you. Okay, so I love we talked a lot about gratitude in the way, it's like weaved into your life today. If you could share one little thing that you do that's maybe a practice around gratitude or even about being mindful that's in your own life, what
Mm.
would that be?
Oh, I think that there's a couple. They change a little bit here and there, but one thing I've been doing recently, because when you get close to book launch, and especially a book that's so personal in nature, there's still a lot of grief, and to move through all of this. And so I've often found I have to kind of ground and calm. And so there's a few things. This might sound silly, but there's a kind of a big window near our dining room table, and I've been playing cards on the dining room table, just looking out at nature, and just doing something that's like calm and methodical, like solitaire or whatever. And it's not on a screen, and I get to look up whenever I want, and there's nature kind of reflected back to me. I don't know, there's something about that lately that's been lovely and amazing. And I think there's just moments, I don't know whether it's weaving in gratitude, but there's moments of intentionality. Before I get on calls like this, there's a candle lit. I often do, walk barefoot outside in the, wood chips, and just kind of ground, that type of thing. The good thing about having two dogs is that there's always walks and there's always nature involved. So that's, a really, really, really important part of my life. But there's touch points of intentionality that are just really important markers in my life. Yeah.
Oh, Steph, thank you. Thank you for showing up for us in this way, for just allowing me to have this wonderful conversation with you. I am so excited for your book to be live, to get it into the hands of so many people, to experience the story with you, and, to help, support you during this process. I mean, you're in
Thank you.
this right now as well. This is a still happening thing, right?
Yeah.
And your grief is still happening. Your mom is still here as of this recording. And so
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
it's,
Thank you for that.
yeah,
Meaningful.
we're
Yeah.
here with you.
Thank
And
you.
so please get yourself a copy of her book through her website. Support your indie bookshop if you can. But if that is price prohibitive, please just get your hands on the book in whatever way that you can. So
Yeah.
thank you so much, Steph.